There we go. So yeah, I specifically specialize in like running due diligence on these kinds of projects. Sorry, I'm just finding one more window that went missing on me here. And then I also have some experience with ICF construction from a job back in the day. So these are some of the projects to date that I've specifically done. This first project on the left is this is the new build fourplex I did. I did this by buying two properties on a corner, cutting off both their backyards. I got two lots out of that, and then was able to do this building here. So this is actually two separate addresses. I could either hold or sell these two houses individually. Um, this middle one here is I bought this house sight unseen, repossessed from the bank. I actually didn't even see the house. I bought it sight unseen, and I never even got to see it until the day I got the keys. And as you can imagine, it was about as horrifying as you can imagine on the inside. So what I did, I tore the house completely down, and then I got approval to sever the land into two building lots, and then I flipped the two lots off to the builder for a nice profit. And then this last one here, it was probably the most straightforward one I've done. I just bought a property with 100-foot frontage, just about 150 feet deep, and also bought this one sight unseen because I'd kind of already done the due diligence ahead of time. This one came to me on a wholesaler's list, and it's about 2 hours from me, so I kind of really had to trust the due diligence process to pull the trigger on that one. Um, bit of past work I used to do. I used to do, like I said, civil engineering. So like this year's the last project I worked on. We took an entire residential street and we converted it to like a European style, like living walking street, like all pavers, concrete and whatnot. A lot of like heavy civil, heavy landscape stuff involved there, which has helped me a ton when doing this kind of development stuff. Um, and then this here, you guys in my pod saw me post about this. This is an ICF tiny house me and another investor built together, kind of just the two of us, which technically is an example of an infill development, just on the smallest scale. So what is an infill development and what is a land severance? So these are kind of my own definitions that I came up with to describe these things. So an infill development is new home construction within the existing urban boundary, and it includes developments on sites not previously developed, or it can also be the redevelopment of existing sites. And what is a land severance? So a land severance is taking an existing parcel of land and dividing it into multiple parcels of land with their own addresses that can be individually sold or held. Sometimes each parcel may have an existing building on it, but more often than not, it creates a new property. So when I say an existing building on it, there are examples where you can take like a row of existing townhouses or like a semi-detached house that's all on one title, and you can actually split it into its own addresses, and you can usually sell them all for significantly more money than it's worth as a single property. And this photo here is an example here of where these fellows bought this house here. They tore it down. They built two duplexes and they got nice big detached garages in the rear. So that's like textbook example of an infill development. And this photo here is of the fourplex that I did. So I own the two existing houses on the corner, and I cut off both their backyards to get two lots out of that. So why infill and why severances? So the main purpose of like infill and severance, like land severance type projects, is to curb urban sprawl or greenfield development, as it's known, which is typically like virgin land on the peripheries of town. Cities are quickly getting less and less of an appetite to let urban sprawl just kind of run rampant as it had in the past due to like environmental impacts and kind of the farmland consumption. So some of the benefits of infill and severing land is the governments are starting to support these things on levels we've never seen before. Projects that would have never passed 10, 20 years ago are starting to actually get approval, again, because of the lack of appetite to continue spreading outward and outward. This is a biggie. Infrastructure is already there when you're doing this stuff in town. There's already sewer, already water. You're not paying like crazy amounts of money to bring this stuff out to the out to vacant land. And some of these smaller projects, you don't really have to go through a crazy approvals process. A lot of these small ones, you can kind of just uh, get your lawyer or a surveyor to take it to the city and just get it approved that way. So here's a couple different types of lot severances and kind of how you do this. So the first one here is like a corner lot, and it kind of sounds exactly like what it is. You can there's an interior corner lot or an exterior corner lot depending on where the house is situated. But a lot of corner lots lend themselves well to this. Um, a side lot is this is the one I did myself. It's a house that has a sizable side yard that you can cut off and get a vacant building lot out of. A through lot, a little more rare, is a lot that both fronts onto one street and backs onto another street, and you can go ahead and cut off the backyard onto the street behind. And then there's these flag lots. These things do exist, but they're not typically supported by the city for a number of reasons. But essentially, what it is kind of a narrow strip of like entranceway and severing off like the rear yard of a property. And the reason why cities don't love these, there's problems with fire and postal, and it kind of sets a precedent because if you think about it, a lot of properties could be divided up this way. So typically, a lot of cities won't support flag lots, but there are occasions where they might. So how do you know if a property is severable? There's a few things you got to look at. The big ones are kind of the size of the property, the zoning, the infrastructure, and environmental agencies such as like river conservation authorities. So how do you know the size of a property? Well, the easiest way to know is to get a survey, and sometimes you can request a survey as part of your offer on the property. Um, you can ask a lawyer or a surveyor if they can dig up an old survey if the owner doesn't have one. You can use the city's GIS digital mapping. They usually have measure tools that are actually surprisingly accurate. And if the city doesn't have its own digital mapping tool, sometimes you can maybe use the counties or maybe like the river conservation authorities digital mapping and find it that way. So this is just a quick example of like what digital mapping looks like. For those of you guys that don't know, I'm Canadian, so I took the liberty of converting all this for you guys. So essentially, what this is these are the two properties I purchased there. So what I did is I went and looked at like the distance between the existing houses and the rear lot line, looked at the depth of the overall property, looked at the frontage there. So I get a pretty good idea of like the size of the property just by for free using the digital mapping. Same deal, you can use the digital mapping to figure out like the areas of the properties. So zoning. So how do you find the zoning of a property? There's a few ways to do that. Kind of the most common and easiest way is you can use that same digital mapping to find out the zoning of a property. Sometimes cities will have a PDF document like this one here, and it'll just be pages upon pages of zoning maps throughout the city. Um, it's a couple other ways are sometimes they'll have a general zoning document that'll be hundreds of pages long and they'll like just stick these maps at the bottom. And other times for like smaller towns, more rural places, you might actually have to like ask the city for their zoning information. And zoning essentially tells you what you can do with the property and like what's required. So like kind of here's an example of finding zoning through digital mapping. When I went here, I had to turn on a couple layers here and I can see that, okay, my properties here are zone R2. So I can go from there and figure out what am I allowed to build and what's required. So this is a look here like at what zoning actually requires. So this one here, it allows a bed and breakfast, a converted dwelling. So that means like taking a building and turning it into a residence. It allows for a duplex dwelling, a home occupation, a semi-detached dwelling, and a single detached dwelling. And then they have different requirements for each housing type. So for single detached here, they're requesting about 3,100 square feet, or if you're on a corner lot, 3,600 square feet. For duplexes, they're asking for about close to double that. For the lot coverage, the city's telling me that I can only cover 41% of the lot with a new house, or 47% of the whole lot with like houses and outbuildings, like detached garages, that kind of stuff. Um, the frontage that's required. So for me here, it's just shy of 30 feet, whether I'm doing a single detached or a semi-detached. And for corner lots, they're asking for upwards of 40 feet. Um, they also request like a lot depth. Um, this is a front yard setback. So what these setbacks are telling me is that, okay, when you have a vacant lot, where can you actually place the house on that lot? So here it's telling me I can place it about 20 feet off the front lot line, about 25 feet off the rear lot line, and about 4 feet or 10 feet, depending on whether you're doing a garage or not. When you have a corner lot, sometimes your side yards have to be further back. In this case, they're asking just shy of 15 feet. And then they also outlay the maximum height. So in my area, you can go up to about 36 feet. They're also outlining the number of units you can have, but interesting for my case, the province, which would be a state in your case, actually came out with some new laws that overruled that these unit counts. So I can actually put more units in these buildings than what this zoning is telling me. So it's important to know that there could be other factors at play other than just the zoning. So what I did with this one here is I'm a drafter by trade. I got a bit of a leg up on this, but you can also get like surveyors or other architects or whatnot to draw this up for you. Is I took the city's digital mapping and I like drew up a site plan. So what I ended up doing was before I purchased the second house here, I actually took my site plan, I gave it to the city, and I got them to comment on it. And they told me that this looks good. They would approve it before I went and bought the second house. So I knew I was sitting really well when I went and did that. So this here is after I got the second house, got kind of the informal okay from the city. I went and got the property surveyed formally. And actually, you know what? The survey was pretty close to my concept drawings that I did based off the digital mapping. Um, when you're ordering a survey, there's kind of two surveys you can get. You can get a boundary survey, which like legally outlines the distances of the properties. And then there's a topographic survey, which they go through, they pick up all the elevations, the contours, they pick up the houses, sheds, all that kind of stuff. If you're doing this kind of development stuff, you do need both those surveys to happen. So this essentially, once I had this survey, I readjusted my site plan, and this is essentially the plan that I handed to the city to get approved for the lot severance. Another thing you got to check, and this is a real biggie, is does your property like fall into an environmental agency's jurisdiction? It could be like a floodplain, a marshland, swamp. Because if it does, you could very well have problems on this, and you could have them putting restrictions on what you're doing, or they could outright deny your development. So when I was running due diligence on this, I went and looked, and you can see this big red area is the properties that are affected by the stream that runs through town. My properties are well enough away, so all good there. Infrastructure. So this is really important. When you're doing this kind of stuff, you got to know if sewers are there, if water mains are there, if gas is there. So you got to know that stuff ahead of time. And sometimes even when you're in the city, there might be sewer and water on one street and not on the other street. And it is very expensive to extend sewers and water mains down the public road. So a quick and easy way to get an idea of what's there, you can go on Google Street View and you look for like manhole lids like this. You look for hydrants, you look for water valves, look for catch basins. So like when I see a manhole lid here and I see one further down the street, I know that there's a sewer in the middle of the road, right? So I know I'm good. Um, so the other thing too is we've all walked around town and you see the streets like paint marked here and there. The paint marks always mean something. Like green is always sewer, red is always storm, blue is always water. So sometimes you can even like go back in time on Google Street View and maybe there's paint marks from a few years ago and you can spot all the infrastructure and know what's there ahead of time. It's also important too that let's say you've got like a large side yard, you want to make sure that there's like no sewer running underneath your big side yard that you think you can sever off, right? So if you can figure out ahead of time that there's no infrastructure under the property that you're looking to develop, that's huge. And this drawing here is what's called a plan and profile drawing. So what this is here, the top part of it is the plan, the bottom is the profile. So the top part here is showing us all the infrastructure. So we can see here, this manhole here is this manhole that I've spotted on Street View. This catch basin here is this catch basin I spotted on Street View, right? So I just reached out to the city. They just gave me their infrastructure plans just free of charge because I asked. Um, the profile portion of this actually tells me the depth of all the infrastructure, which is really important as well because it's going to dictate what level you can set your basement at. One thing to note here, you'll note they didn't show the water main depth on here, and that actually burned me. I'll show you in a couple slides ahead. Another thing to note here too is if you're looking at doing a development or like severing off a property, you got to look to see like, okay, is there a hydrant in the way? Is there a hydro pole in the way? Like, is there infrastructure that I could possibly have to relocate? This here is a picture of a hydrant being installed. As you can imagine, moving a hydrant is not cheap. So it's not a reason not to do something, but you definitely have to like provision for this kind of stuff. Like to do this, they would have had to shut down water for the whole block to move this hydrant. So a couple other things that you got to watch out for when you're kind of looking at this stuff. The road ownership. So just because you're in town, doesn't necessarily mean the town owns the road. Like it's possible the county owns it or the state owns it. And if it's a county road, well, now the county's going to get a say in your development as well. Um, it could be heritage. If you've got an old property, some of these cities and towns will they will put a heritage designation on properties, and they might not let you alter or like tear down a house if they feel it has historical significance. Um, archaeological. If there are occasions where they could put an archaeological study on you, which means you actually have to go dig test pits, and if they find anything, they could dig up your whole yard looking for like historical artifacts. And up here in my neck of the woods, you're completely on the hook for that. The official plan, kind of similar to zoning, is the city's long-term outlook. So although the zoning tells you what you can do today, the official plan tells you what you can do tomorrow. So they'll have a plan that outlines what they envision for the city long term. So let's say you're like in a low density area right now. It's possible that they have that area as high density in their future plans. So if you want to do a development, and let's say you even want to rezone it, if it's already deemed like high density in their official plan, they will totally support your project. So it's super important to like know what the city is looking for in the future. Environmental is a big one too. If it's like a former factory or former commercial property and it's contaminated, that can be an absolute nightmare. Like I personally just steer clear of what's called brownfield sites, and those are like industrial and former commercial sites. Um, Noise. Are you located near a lumber yard, a factory? Is there factors that could possibly impede your development due to noise? And are you near the interstate or arterial roadways or railways? Sometimes those can affect whether you can or can't develop, or might have put restrictions on you. Like you might have to like use triple glazed windows or something, which is a lot more expensive. So I'm going to run through a little case study on this one here I did. So this is in a town about 2 hours away from me called Wasaga Beach. This is a really popular beach town in my area. Um, Fun little fact for you guys: the largest freshwater beach in the world is actually in Canada, if you can believe it. Um, so this actually had a bit of a tourism play to it as well. So, anyways, what I ended up doing with this one, like I said, it had about 100-foot frontage, about 150 feet deep. So this is the new lot here. This is the existing lot here in the existing house. So you can see here there was an overhead electric wire coming to the house here, which you can't have that. So I actually had to pay to pick up a hydro. Sorry, when I say hydro, that means electric in my area because everything was hydroelectric forever. So yeah, we call it hydro up here. You hear me say that again. Um, so you pick up the electric pole. I moved it to the other side. And then I had to bring in a new sewer line and a new water line for the new lot. And then I had to find this out the hard way. The existing house's sewer line and water line were actually on the new lot. So shovels were already in the ground. I found this out, and at the 11th hour, I had to pay for a whole new water service and sewer line for the existing house. So really hard to catch that one. I had drawings from the city that showed me they were coming off the front of the house, but in actuality, it wasn't the case. So this is kind of what that looked like. This is the new lot here. You can see the new water service here and the new sewer line that came in here. And then this is the new water line, the new sewer line for the existing house. And I actually had to move the driveway too, because the driveway for the existing house was on the new lot. So I had to move the driveway. And this is what the house looked like. So this was like just a crappy hoarder house. This house was in a rough shape when I got it. So fixed it up pretty nice. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of put lipstick on a pig, but it turned out pretty decent. Um, so here's the numbers on this one. Um, this came to me on a wholesaler's list. They were asking 425 for this. I was able to get it for 410. The wholesaler had it locked up for 390. So we paid $20,000 in an assignment fee. It cost me about $6,000 to close on it. So initially I'm in for about 416. I spent about just shy of 46,000 renovating the existing house, about $700 in insurance, and then holding costs. So I had a mortgage on it for 312,000, electric, water, property tax, gas, and I held this house for about 12 months. That ended up costing me about 17,000. So my total expenses for the existing house were about 63,500. So the development costs. The survey cost me just shy of 5,000. The application to sever the land, 1,700. Moving the electric pole cost me about $1,000, but that is subsidized. The city actually paid a good portion of that themselves. That would actually cost more like $5,000 if you had to pay for it all yourself. Um, my legal costs to sever the property was about $1,500. I had some miscellaneous on this, and then this one hurt. The servicing cost came in at 67,000. It was only supposed to be like 40 and change, but then when I found out about having to move the existing water and sewer line, that ran up really quick on me. So I sold the existing house for 500,000. I sold the vacant lot for 312,500. I paid about 36,000 in realtor commissions, about $3,000 to close it, and I walked away with about 212,000 on this one before taxes. So this is the new build I did on the two lots that I severed off those other two houses. Just give me a quick second. So this is actually, excuse me, the second time this house was built. A couple friends of mine actually built this exact same house in another city about an hour and a half away. So I saved a whole bunch of costs on drawings because I literally just took their drawings. I squeezed the house by about 10 inches. I made it about a foot longer, and I just literally built the exact same house, which was really helpful because all the lessons my friends had to learn the hard way on this one, I kind of had the cheat code to how to do it the right way on mine. I had it was fantastic kind of having someone over my shoulder that had already done this build one time. Um, this thing needed about an 8 foot tall retaining wall along the side there. There's a heavy crossfall across the lot. I did 9 foot tall basements here, and that's so I can put units in the basement. So that's when I say fourplex. What this actually is it's two houses with a common wall that'll both have basement suites. So I've kind of backdoored my way into having a fourplex. Um, the basements are only accessible from side doors on the outside. When I did this, I already closed them off from the get go. Um, the electric panels for the main units are located in the garage, so that way I can put secondary electric panels in the basements. The utility rooms and the laundry rooms are also located up on the second floor. So again, I can put separate HVAC and separate laundry in the basement units. Um, I specifically placed the garages on the outside. Excuse me. so I could get extra parking in these little side yards here. Had I put the garages on the inside, it really like pinches you to putting the parking on the inside, and it can kind of hurt how wide you can make the driveway. Um, I went underground with the electric. That's why you don't see any overhead wires here. Um, I actually, this is a little nuance here. When I did this, the city actually only let me sever off one lot. They wanted me to get the foundation in place and then further sever the building as a left and a right address. And the reason why they wanted that, so the common wall didn't mistakenly end up on the other person's side. So that's why the city had me do that. That actually caused me some trouble, and I would definitely push back on the city next time. And part of the reason why is because I was done this and I waited many months after to get that severance to be approved. Interest rates went up twice while I was waiting, and it just hurt me having to do it that way. Um, so this took me about 8 months to complete this. Started at the very beginning of March last year. I finished in October, and I general contracted this myself. So I was on site. I hired all the contractors. I got all the pricing. I was there not every day, but most days, and I even did a bit of work myself. So this is how it looked before I cut up the properties. So what I had to do, I actually had to remove these 4 trees. I had to get Canada Post to move their mailboxes, which actually they just did without too much trouble. I had to rip down a detached garage, and there's two. There was a cable and a telephone pedestal at the just kind of right behind this vehicle there, and kind of a funny story. There was telephone and cable lines running through my properties here, and the telephone and cable company wouldn't come move the lines. So I actually just like got into the pedestals and rerouted the cable to the existing houses myself. Um, so as you can see here, there's like a pretty heavy crossfall here. So that's kind of why I needed the retaining wall. So this is how the excavation looked here. So Dave, my contractor, he's about 6'4". You could stack him up a couple times here. The reason why this is such a deep excavation is because this is for both the retaining wall and the basements. You can see here, I've got the cable and telephone pedestal. They're actually strapped to a stump so they don't fall in the hole. So concrete guys came in, they poured the footings in one day, and then we set up the foundation walls. So little tip for you: if you're ever doing a new build, not all concrete companies have standard 8 foot forms. So if you want like extra tall basements like I did here, you specifically want to find a company that like has like 9 foot forms. Otherwise, they're gonna be renting them and you're gonna be paying for it. So that's something I kind of had to shop around for. Um, Here's how the foundation turned out. So that's after backfill, and then obviously there's a drainage and weatherproofing that goes into this. Um, this is kind of how the framing started. So one thing to note is when you're doing multifamily new builds, there's going to be a big fire separation component here. So you can see here, like in the attics, there's multiple layers of drywall, and what that is that's the fire barrier between the two houses. Um, what I ended up doing here was I actually ordered an extra truss, and the guys put all the drywall on the truss on the ground, and then they boomed it up into place because that way, there's like no way you can lug sheets of drywall up into the attic and do that after. So that worked out really well. And then this little bit here, something like I had to consider and put a lot of thought into as I was doing this is anywhere along the common wall between the two units, you need that fire separation there. So I had to get in there and put some sheets of drywall in there before the stairs went in. Otherwise, I would have had to rip out the stairs and do it afterwards. So like I had to put a lot of like thought ahead into this. Um, Here's kind of how the servicing went. So just so you know, I actually serviced the house with sewer and water after the house was already in place. And I do not advise doing that. But the reason why I did is because the city wouldn't let me cut open the road in the winter. But I wanted to get going. So I decided to bring them in retroactively. So these are the two sewer lines coming in from the road. This is what a water service looks like. um, as it's connected here. They live tap this into an existing water main. And here's where I got burned on this. What happened to me was the existing water main here happened to be directly in the way of my new sewer lines. So I had to kick my sewer lines up and over the existing water main, which totally took all the slope out of my sewer lines. So what I had to do then was like cut out my footings so I could lift the sewer lines up and get that fall back on the sewer lines or on the sanitary lines. So this is kind of how it looked like with drainage tile and the water and sewer coming into the building. So as mentioned, I had to build this mammoth retaining wall to even make this thing work because of that heavy crossfall. So my contractors essentially, you built this thing kind of block by block. Normally when you do these, you would put down one whole course and then you would do like another course and another course as you go up. But because of how tight the site was, they kind of had to build the whole wall to full height and then go from like back to forward to build this wall out. Here, this is kind of how the wall looked at the back. Like you can see how tall this is. That's like over 8 feet tall there. I actually built the wall and I wasn't happy. This is one of the houses I cut the backyard off of. I left the backyard in pretty bad shape after doing all this. So I actually had the contractor come back in and extend the wall for me so I could make a much more usable rear yard for the existing house. Um, so yeah, as I was saying, I put the electrical panels in the garages so I can put separate electric panels in the basements. Um, so because garages are viewed as outdoor spaces, you kind of have to insulate it the same way you would the whole exterior of the house. Um, this is kind of how the insides look. So obviously insulated everything. Had to do more drywall up on the common wall where I was going to put bulkheads and HVAC. So it was like that kind of stuff. Um, that one I didn't think to do ahead. I actually had to yank out some HVAC, get in there, put the drywall up, and put the HVAC back. Um, and this here is like this behind this wall is the stairwell down to the basement. So I've already preemptively fire and sound separated that stairwell. Um, so this is kind of funny. I um, I had a contractor come in and pour new sidewalks, city sidewalks. But then a few weeks after that, I had the truck come in to pour the basements. So another lesson I learned the hard way is that pour your basements first because the cement truck might just pulverize your brand new sidewalks. So what happened here is I had to get my brand new sidewalks ripped out. I could not find a contractor to come back and do the little bit of concrete work. So Martin here is actually my kitchen guy. The three of us just repoured the city sidewalks ourselves, and actually turned out not too bad. This is the upstairs in the new build. So as I said, I put laundry up top. I put the utility rooms up on the second floor. These here are the unfinished basements. So these basements are about just shy of, or a little over 9 feet tall. You can see that's the stairwell in from the side only. And you guys in my group, you've heard me talking about building permits. This is what I'm going after here. I'm getting second building permits to go and finish these two basements into their own units. So there'll be 2 bedroom units when it's all said and done. This area up front here will have its own furnace, own electric panel. I'll separate the water and kind of make it so that each unit is paying for all their own utilities. Um, so yeah, the 3-piece bathroom's already roughed in. I did some preliminary work, like I already put venting in when I was doing the main build. I've put conduits in for electric ahead of time. Um, so one thing I'll have to do too, similar to the fire separation between the 2 units I built, I'll have to put 2 layers of 5/8 drywall across the whole ceiling there, and that'll be the fire separation between the basement unit and the main unit. So here's kind of how the house has turned out. So like this is kind of the main living area, like the living room, kitchen. This is the master bedroom, which has an ensuite and a big walk-in closet, and that's like the main bathroom. So didn't go overly fancy, but it turned out pretty nice. I went with a nice landlord gray on all the walls. This is what the floor plans looked like. So the main floor here, pretty standard for like semis and townhouses, and then the upstairs has 3 bedrooms, has a laundry room, utility room, an ensuite, a main bathroom, and a big walk-in closet. So here's the numbers on this whole project. I'm kind of looking at this in phases because I had to do the initial phase of severing the property and constructing it. Now I'm kind of in an interim phase where I'm just holding it now with the two main units rented out. And then the final phase will be getting the basement units done and I'll have a fully functioning fourplex. So um, to start here, to get the two backyards cut off the existing properties, I I spent about $3,000 on survey, about 3,500 on lawyer, and it cost me a little over 3 grand to sever the land. But here's the interesting thing, and this is similar to my other project. Um, it only cost me like 9,500 bucks to sever that land. That land was worth 350,000 the day I got it severed, and I could have just turned around and sold that land. And part of me thinks I might have should have at times, but anyways, um, that's the value of like severing these properties because you literally create value out of like nowhere. And I should also mention the two existing houses are both cash flowing rentals too. So not only am I able to cut off their backyards, get the land, the two existing houses are pretty decent properties in their own right. Um, from there, it cost me about 40, just shy of 42,000 to get building permits and fees. It cost me 676,000 to build the two houses. Um, right now, I threw in kind of just $40,000 because I've got some residual work this year, like fences, decks, driveways, that kind of stuff. So I've kind of just roughly factored that in. And then I spent about 87,000 in taxes as I was building this. So the cost out of my pocket to get this built was about just shy of 850,000. So just quickly on the taxes, and you guys all know this is going to vary wildly depending on where you are. Um, so when you do new homes in my area, it's subject to tax. So my tax bill on this was going to be 117,000. However, I was fully able to recoup all the tax I put out during the build. Then, because I built rental houses, I got a $48,000 credit given back to me. So when it was all said and done, I actually came out ahead by about $18,450, which is actually rare. Normally, when you do new builds, you don't come out ahead, but I did this during a falling market for record high construction prices, which hurt me in some areas, but it actually kind of aided me here a little bit. Um, so I got the place appraised for the purpose of putting a mortgage on here, and the two houses combined praised at 1,260,000. So again, the cash I had in the deal was about 845,000. So total equity on completion was 414,000. So in this interim phase that I'm in right now, um, I got a mortgage on this for $800,000, which is about a 63.5% LTV based on the $1.26 million valuation. So with that said, as of today, I've got about 45,000 in cash still in the building, but I was able to pull out almost everything else. Um, so my monthly payment on this is at 5.89%, and it's $4,703. My monthly rental income is 4,200. I got 2,100 per side for the two upper units. Um, my insurance is about $198, and property taxes are to be determined. So around here, when you do a new build, it can take the city a year or two to apply property taxes to your property. With that said, though, yes, they will retroactively bill me for all this for that time in between. But for now, I'm not being hit with property tax. So I guess full transparency, and I'm like I said, this didn't fully go my way. I'm actually negative $701 a month right now. Um, Part of the problem was they literally put up interest rate 8 times from the time I broke ground to the time I finished, and construction costs ran through the roof, as I'm sure a lot of you guys know. So those two factors kind of hurt me for now. But looking ahead on this, Once I get the two basement units done, each basement unit should rent for $1,600. So I'll be pulling in another 3,200 on top of my 4,200. My mortgage to start will still be the same 4,703 that it is now. My estimated property tax is about will be about $600. That's just me basing it off similar properties. And my insurance, I'm sure it'll go up by the time I add a couple units to that. So by the time I get the basement units done, I'm looking at a profit of about 1850 a month. Now, I don't so to finish those two units, I'm anticipating about another 140,000 to finish the two basement units. And I like I mentioned before, I have about 45,000 still left in this. And I want all my cash back. So I'm gunning when I'm done this, I'll be gunning to get another 800 and 185,000 back out of this. So I believe, based off current comps, that when I'm done the basements and I'm getting the rents that I'm getting and I get it appraised again, that the two units will come, they will appraise for about a million five. So if I want all my money back out, that's going to come in at around 980,000, which is about a 65% LTV based off what I believe the valuation is going to be. So my mortgage at that higher amount will be 5,762. My cash flow once I refinance will be about $788. I'll have about a little over $500,000 in equity with $0 still left in the deal, and that's on day one. So I would anticipate being able to raise rents and fingers crossed, maybe interest rates go down a little bit as well. And I could see this being a really good long-term hold. But with that said, that's a lot of equity in there too. I could also make the case to eventually sell as well. So that's pretty much everything I got to share. So yeah, that's my Instagram, Facebook, email, and my website is waterbillsolutions.com. So yeah, guys, appreciate you joining in, and yeah, please ask me some questions or let me know what you think.
Hi, that was really impressive. And
Thanks.
yeah, it's like it seems like there's so much involved in doing all this. And I recently invested in a syndication where they were taking like 300 acres and that were permitted for single family homes, and then they're rezoning it for commercial and an RV park.
Okay.
Um, but how would someone like that doesn't have any like knowledge even like get to a point to do not necessarily do all the construction that you've done, but really just learn how to um like take a piece of vacant land or take like in the instance of the syndication that I invested in, like rezone it for like I would have no idea how to do that. How would I looked into some courses online, but I don't know if they are legitimate. Like a lot of them have bad reviews and stuff. So
Yeah,
how would you suggest someone even begin to learn the process of doing something like this? More so that the zoning part of it.
sure. The easiest answer is find somebody that's doing it and see if you can work with them. You know what I mean? If you found somebody doing something like this and maybe you can come in as a partner or something like that, bringing some cash or whatever, and just make sure they teach you, train you, that's definitely the easiest way to do it. Like I had quite a leg up on this because of my past career.
Mhm.
But I think that's the quickest way to getting proficient at this. If you guys are interested, I do have a US example of how to do this as well. I'm sure you want to see that as well. Yeah, Tristan's gung ho. Um,
For sure.
so you guys got my screen here. Okay. So this is Tampa. I've spent a lot of time looking at how you do this in the US. I've talked to some people doing exactly what I do in the US. Um, and for the record, I'm looking to come south of the border and do this as well. So keep me in mind if you ever want to talk further about this stuff. So I'll give you an example here. So this here is GIS digital mapping, just kind of like that example I showed you. This is actually a program that I downloaded. It's called QGIS. It's free. It's open source. And I'm able to download a whole bunch of data that I was able to get from Tampa. And what I have here is I have a whole bunch of layers. I've got like the sewers, storm sewers. I've got all the parcel, all the properties here. I've got the zoning turned on here. So if you see these different colors, that's the different zones. So I'll give you an example. I'll give you like a perfect example of how you do this. You can probably see why I picked this property here. So when you look at this, you probably notice one of these properties is not like the others. And it's because this property here is actually 3 lots. And it was really common back in the day when land was way, way cheaper and laws were way looser for people to buy 2 lots, 3 lots, and build one house on it. And they just wanted more land. So those examples exist all over the place. And the nice thing is you can actually go back and sever those. And really the best thing about that, there are a lot of instances where you can actually do it by rights, where you don't need the city's approval. You can just get your lawyer or surveyor to come in here and look at this. So I'll show you exactly how I believe you would do this. So here's the cool thing about this program. There's actually all sorts of background information on all these parcels. So when I click on this guy here, I actually have a whole whack of information come up. So I've got the owner's name, I've got the address, I've got when this was, I got the PIN number for like tax purposes, zip code, I've got everything at my fingertips here. But here's the really interesting thing, and this is where any one of you guys could start on this. Every property has what's called a legal description. This is the exact same both up here in Canada and in there. So when you look at a legal description, I can see right away that this is actually, it's not 3616 West Cass Street. It's actually lots 88, 89, and 90. And that's part of this. It's probably part of an old subdivision plan. So there's probably a subdivision plan from many, many, many decades ago where these were all 3 lots, but this fella here bought all 3 of them, put one house on it. So if you could get your hands on that one property, I'm almost certain you could sever that. And then I'll just show you what that looks like quick. So this here is the property. So the cool thing here is when I go in here and look at this, like, look at this, like this is a little house on a massive piece of land. So you got a couple options here. You could possibly cut off 1 lot, cut off 2 lot, fix up the existing house. You could put a tenant in there while you're doing all this other work and actually get money coming back in as you're doing this. You could rip the house down and get 3 nice big lots. Right now, if we go back to this here, as I mentioned to you, I've got the zoning layer here too. So when I click on the zoning layer, so same thing here, this comes up here. This is zone RS50. So what RS50 is, it's residential single family on 50-foot lots. Okay. So what that means is you're required to have 50-foot lots, and then there's an area requirement as well, which I don't have right in front of me. So what you can do is if I want to come in here and let's say I want to measure a line, shrink this. I want to measure a line. I can go to feet, and we can kind of roughly measure this. It's 150 feet. It's exactly 3 lots based off the current zoning. So I'm certain you could sever this one by rights. So the other thing you could potentially do though with this is right now you're only allowed single family detached here. You could try and upzone this. So you could go to what Tampa has is RM16, which would allow you to build like duplexes or triplexes. So let's say you were successful in getting this zone to RM16 or whatever it is, and then you severed the property into 3. You could potentially go build 3 triplexes there and get 9 units out of what used to be 1 unit, like nice brand new triplexes on land that I think would have a pretty good value. So here's the other cool thing when you're looking at this kind of stuff. You look at the neighborhood here, and there's new builds right in the area, right? So there's a new build a couple doors down. This thing just sold for a little over 900,000. And then there's another new build just right here. This thing also just sold for about 900,000. So if I can pick up this dumpy little house for 200-300, whatever it's worth, split the land up, get it upzoned, get some multifamilies put on here, that thing will cash flow like no tomorrow. So like that's kind of what I'm looking at doing as well. So that's like kind of how you guys can do this too. It's pretty much the same process.
And what is the name of this program that you're using again?
Called QGIS. There's a learning curve to it though, so you have to watch some how-tos or hit me up or something.
Yeah.
But with that said though, you don't need to go as far as like downloading a program and figuring all this out. If you just went on City of Tampa public mapping, they have maps there. They're not as comprehensive. You don't get as much access to it, but you can still go on there and fiddle around with the various layers and get an idea and use like the measuring tool like I did there. So you got a few options when you're doing this kind of stuff. So the other cool thing with this kind of stuff is I actually went and I downloaded the sewers. And so like I can see right away that, okay, yep, there's a sewer right there. That's what this red line is here. The green lines are storm sewers, you know? So when I have all this stuff at my disposal, I can really quickly rip through due diligence on this and like make sure I never get burned on this, because there are a lot of ways to get burned on this. And one of the biggest ways is overpaying for a property. So if someone is charging a premium because they think their property has a couple lots and you pay that premium, and then you go to the city and the city's like, oh no, you can't do that, and you paid the premium, you're in trouble on that because you're not going to be able to sell it for what you paid for it. So it's like pivotal that you get your due diligence right, or you have a backup plan. So let's say I bought this property for whatever reason, they won't let me do it. I want to make sure that I can possibly maybe turn this into a duplex, or I can fix it up and maybe flip it for a few bucks or something like that. You always got to have a backup plan when you're doing stuff like this.
I know like I've like just quickly looked for land in like my area, and then I've gone to see a couple, and they're always like on slopes or, hills or something like that. So do you but there are homes that are on those slopes in the neighborhood. Is that like so much more expensive when you're dealing with land that's not flat?
It can be. If it's really sloped, you start to get into some heavy engineering costs, and you might need like slope studies and stuff, and like stuff like that. I try and steer clear of heavily sloped properties, but I'll show you a little tip to that here. You can actually download the contours layer. And so like I can see right at my fingertips what exactly the elevation of the city looks like, right? So if we were somewhere in Tennessee and I had the contours layer turned on, you'd have a really good idea of like just how heavily sloped the property is just from your desktop.
Interesting.
Yeah. Any other questions, guys?
Hey, Dan, do you have any experience? We bought a property for short-term rental, and they had easiest way to describe it was called a urban infill development. I think maybe terminology is mixed up there, but it looks like they took 4 lots and combined them into a small subdivision down near like a downtown area. Is that something where combining lots and combining lots through the city? Do you have any experience with that? Is it creating a subdivision in a sense?
Yes, I do. So this one here I'm working on, I'm not financially involved in this one. I'm on this one more on a consulting basis. What this is here, this is the green, you can see this PDF, right? Yeah. The green is one property. There's just a house on it. The red is another property, just a house on it. And then what we did, we approached the house next door. He didn't want to sell, but he was willing to sever off his backyard and sell it to us. So we took these 3 properties and we're in the process of getting approved for 15 townhouses.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
to answer your question, yes. And it's a very valuable move to do that. If you're out there looking for ways to really hit it big with land, this is what's called a land assembly. And if you can pick up sizable properties and you can go to the neighbor and get his sizable property, the act of accumulating properties together is very, very valuable because you could take that, combine them, you could upzone them, flip them off to a builder, and the builder's going to pay you good money for that. And if you want to build it yourself, well, you just got land, you got a prime piece of land for as cheap as you possibly could.
I never thought about that. I have a rental and the neighbor has a huge backyard. I mean, it is so big. And I've never even thought about that. So that's actually a good idea.
Yeah, hit them up and let me know how it goes.
Dan, where did the Tampa property kind of come from? Why? What is it?
Why that
3
property?
Yeah, 36, whatever the address was. Why that one? How did they get on your radar?
Great question. So this is kind of getting really into the weeds here. So give me a second. This is loading. This program's kind of heavy. So all of this mapping, all of this stuff you see here, there's background data on all of it. So just like when oops, give me a second here. Just like when I clicked on this and that table came up with all that data, I actually have a table here. So I have all the data for over 500,000 properties in Tampa, and I can filter through this. So when I do this, I can go in here. Do you ever play with SQL, Tristan?
Dude, you know I own a software company, right?
So yes.
Oh, big time.
Okay. So I pull out my extraordinarily rudimentary SQL-ish type stuff. So what I'll do here
Prepare to be
is,
judged.
yeah. So I can go, I want to see all the parcels that are greater than 1.5 acres and I want to see where the land use group equals single family, and I can run that and it'll just spit me out a list of like the 10,000 properties that meet that criteria. That's how I found it.
So what's next, right? Are you in Pod 78 is represented heavily in this call, but Francis and
Ryan.
I'm starting a wholesale operation, right? So Dan, are you kicking this over to somebody else to be like, hey, get me this property? Are you just calling Mr. I don't know, James Garcia in this example?
Yeah, I've actually tried to call James Garcia. So what I did, like, man, this is why Street View is so unbelievably important in this. So check this out. So I'm looking at this house, okay? I've been trying to find James Garcia's number. I'm struggling with it. If I go back in time here, I can see they actually had this house listed just the year before. So I looked at this and I gave Sue a call and said, hey, did this sell? She said, nope. She said he's not interested in selling anymore. She said he still owns it, but he's not interested in selling. So I need to cut Sue out of this and call Mr. Garcia directly. That's kind of how I do it. Okay, sorry, to answer your question. What's next? Okay, I've got all this data, I've got all this stuff. What do I do next? I don't know. I do some cold calling myself. If I were to systematize this has VA written all over it to go find numbers and teach how to do due diligence and stuff like that, and then see what can come my way. But I'm not fully sure. If you, Tristan, are out looking at properties, even in your own area, and you find a big property in Mansfield, I'd love for you to come and say, hey, Dan, I found this. What do you think of it? Can we divide this thing up? What does the zoning allow? You know what I mean? Like, I'd love to look at some stuff like that.
Awesome. Did you raise money for the potential 4-unit or the 2-unit, basically what you built?
No, I used my own cash, and then I used cash in lines of credit.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Any other questions, guys?
Like if you are like asking a neighbor like to potentially buy a part of their lot, I mean, how would you even know? I guess would you look at the price per square foot of the land right now, or I guess how would you even begin to know that? Because I guess you'd want to know the end numbers to see what you could pay for that. So you'd have to understand like how much permitting costs, I guess how much it is to build per square foot. I mean, it seems like there's like so much to go into that to see how much you could potentially offer for a part of a neighbor's yard.
You absolutely have to reverse engineer this. So like if we're using this that example there that I showed you in Tampa, um, if this, what I would first do is I would try to buy it as if it's just a crappy single family detached house. That's the cheapest I'm ever going to get that property. If we even start talking about land, that guy's going to start asking for more money. It always happens. So let's say this guy knows what he has and we're negotiating. I'm going to figure out the most I can pay for it to make it worth my while. And what I have to do that is figure out what can I do with it. So as of right now, I could sever that up into 3 properties and maybe keep the house and get 2 single family detached. So I would figure out, okay, what are these worth? What is that going to cost me to build that? What is that going to cost me to get the approvals for that? And how much do I want to make? And that's going to be the price I can offer. Now, if I want to get really creative, maybe I've already spoken to the city and I've got in writing that they would let me upzone that to one of the RM zones. And now I know I can go build a bunch of triplexes on those lots. Then I can offer them something totally different. But obviously we all want to pay the lowest possible. I always just try to buy property as if it's just a house, you know what I mean? And that the land is bonus. And if you guys saw the numbers on, especially on that Wasaga Beach one, where I literally just cut off the side yard, that's why that deal was so good, because I literally bought it just as if it were a house, but it was also a big vacant lot in a popular beach town.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, 'cause like I'm wondering if like the house I'm thinking, I wonder if it is like 2 lots just because it is so big.
So yeah, the easiest way to check is it's all public information. If you went and found the legal description and it mentioned 2 lots there, what I would then do is ask a surveyor or a lawyer to confirm that and ask about the likelihood of being able to split that land. And that's kind of how I would start with it.
Thanks.
Yep. Well, unless anyone has anything else, I'm good to wrap up.
Yeah, that was super interesting. Thank you. It was very interesting. See
That was
all
awesome.
yeah, all the parts that went into it.
For sure. And okay, I'll throw one more thing out there. When you guys are looking at land, okay, so this whole conversation I've been talking about buying houses and cutting land off that house. Okay. So there is absolutely value to doing that with an existing house, because if you can fix up the existing house and put a tenant in there, you might not have any holding costs on that. If you remove the house, now you do have holding costs on that, right? So that's something to consider as well. I can argue that if you can save the house, fix it up, get a decent tenant in there, and especially if the house carries the whole property, it's as safe as you will ever do any development. That's like the training wheels way to doing this, and the way you can profit like really, really nicely on this kind of stuff. So the other thing I was going to say though is there's all sorts of land around, land for sale, lots for sale. that are just vacant lots. You see them all the time. Actually, up here, there's not. That's why I even have to do this over the top stuff. But when I look down in the US, yeah, all the cities seem to have various areas that have vacant lots kicking around. Um, if let's say you see a large lot that's been for sale for a little while, and I found one of these in Tampa. Um, if you go look at the zoning, maybe the seller has no idea that they can split their lot one more time, and they actually have two lots, right? So you can always do a bit of due diligence and find out if you can find out something that the seller doesn't know, and go from there. Because let's say you buy one of these real cheap lots that I keep hearing about, these $15,000 lots, but you know that you can split that again, and you can flip the two lots off to a builder. Maybe the builder will pay you 30 for each lot. That's actually decently likely.
What's a decent game plan? Like, so for example, you know, I live in Mansfield, Ohio. In the city that I'm in, I'd love to stand up a 50 to 80 unit apartment complex. There is one lot of R3 left. It's in front of a trailer park, which is next to a sewer plant. And it's quite literally shit land. You know, the city of Ontario is in historically just been sticklers about rezoning.
Yep.
I mean, as far as presenting things to them in a way like, hey, here's the opportunity. Like, do you have any pointers or recommendations for those more complex scenarios outside of just doing it through an attorney?
Yep. So if you gave me the task of going to find something that I can build quite a few units on there, get a few stories up, what I would do is a couple things. One, you're right, look at the current zoning, figure out like where today can I do this? And you kind of said it's problematic from what you told me. Two, I would then go look at, we call it an official plan up here. It's called all sorts of stuff. Go figure out where the city wants the high density in the future. If you know where the city wants the high density in the future, go try and pull off a land assembly like the one I showed you. And that's how you get that done.
What about zoning or permitting for, you know, I mean, obviously towards the West Coast, it seems like ADUs are popping up all over the place. I mean, have you seen complications or foresee any complications with that? Or
Here's the thing. It's only going to go more and more the way of this presentation, where society is not going to get less environmentally conscious, and you know what I mean. That's not going to happen. It's only going to continue to go the way that I kind of showed tonight. So if you look at it, if you bet long term, here, and I'll give you an example. I've been looking at the city of Charlotte, North Carolina. I was actually part of a public meeting call there, whatever reason. What they're doing, and this is something for you to watch for, is they're overhauling all their zoning, completely changing it all. And all of it is to be way more conducive to everything I talked about tonight. They're going to allow you to sever smaller and smaller lots that they never let you do before. They're going to let you take a house, convert it to 2 units, and still let you do an ADU in the rear yard. So like cities are going to just keep going that way. Where we're in my province in Ontario, we're way ahead of that curve. Like we're like California levels of shoving houses in places, but so you guys aren't that far behind. A lot of these cities are quickly going this way as well.
interesting. Like I'm a suburban area of like Columbus, right? So
Yep.
the city in Mansfield made a pretty stupid call, I don't know, 15 years ago, and took residential houses and literally just changed the zoning to commercial office space. So it's a house with a kitchen and a bathroom that is now an office space, and it completely ruined neighborhoods.
Yep.
And I feel like that plays a part into why they are such sticklers, because you have now a chiropractor and an attorney in a a house with a wraparound porch, you know,
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
and the entire front yard is a parking lot and it just doesn't fit. So
What that can be too, though, is opportunity. Where if my guess is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is sometimes when cities do things like that, they hurt the value of all those houses you just talked about.
and that's
Uh,
exactly what happened.
but let's say enough time goes by, there's a new mayor and a new city council, and you know that you can get that zoned back to residential, and everyone else thinks that this is an office house. That's an opportunity.
Interesting. I feel like I'd have to buy them all, or at least majority of them.
Just buy them all, dude.
No one wants to live next to the ethnic massage parlor with visitors of all hours of the day. Which I hate to say it, but that's a lot of what it is. And I mean, I own a very large office complex down the road from the office houses. I don't know. They're literally an old 1930s house with an entire front yard that's a dry or like a parking lot.
Yeah.
And you're like, so
Hey, it's better than the waste treatment facility, right?
that's true. Yeah. I'd stand a unit up there, but no way.
Cool.
Not so.
If if anybody wishes, add me on Insta or Facebook, and like I see my pod all the time. But Ryan and Francis, if you guys want to add me, that'd be great to connect and keep in touch. Funny story, Francis. That's actually my girlfriend's name too. So it threw me off when I saw your name.
You thought
Like,
she
I
was
like,
sneaking up
"What?"
on you?
Yeah, she's not home right now. I'm like, did she really join this? Like,
That is funny. Quick question. What's your thoughts on like boxable.com or or not boxable.com, but boxable, the or any of the other companies that are building these not deliver type homes, but somewhat.
It's like a home in a box. You just like pull up and open it.
so okay, I do have thoughts on this. So first off, haven't heard of Boxable. I'm sure we have equivalents up here, but like, is this literally where they show up and drop a shipping container on your property and you live in it?
Not a shipping container. It's like, yeah, it's almost like you unfold it, but you have to have the foundation laid. So it's not really just the price that you see on the website. There's so much else that goes with it. But I'm just wondering if those you see that like becoming the way of the future.
I 100% see that as an opportunity where if let's say you can get a 2 acre piece of land, maybe somewhere in town, maybe on the periphery of town, and you can very quickly get some concrete guys in there, and see you later, Peter. If you can get some concrete guys in there, lay a whole bunch of pads, and just have the company show up, drop a bunch of houses. If there's a lot to be said about the velocity of money, and if you can get this, just knock it out super quick, get those rented out, get them sold. I would be all over that. And actually, the U.S. is way more conducive to that than up here. To be fair, if I'm to do something in the U.S., I would absolutely look at that.
Cool.
Francis, I looked at building a little tiny home community for two reasons. One is my parents have 40 acres out in the country setting. So if I could build a little Airbnb like-ish community / I want to live in a 600 square foot tiny home and get featured on HGTV, or even like in town, the college style, I think that style and that method, I think even putting 5, 6 up, even up to 12 in a little cul-de-sac would get some major traction in pretty much most US markets, in my opinion, especially on the East Coast here.
Yeah, I was just wondering like how does there's the foundation, and then I wonder what happens with respect to permitting because they're already built. So I'm just curious as to like how the permitting, or if certain cities allow them or not, don't allow them. I just have no idea.
Francis, I follow Boxable, like their email newsletter. They have some investor relations. I know they're fundraising. at the moment, or
Yes,
they've
I
been
saw that.
fundraising forever.
Yeah.
They've been touting a lot of certifications that they've received. And I think they're really trying to communicate the message of their manufacturing standards and so forth. I personally have some concerns with the company, exactly how you stated. What is the building code and how does that vary state to state, municipalities? They have, I think they supplied a government contract. It may have been Guantanamo Bay or somewhere, but it was a military contract with hundreds of these casitas. And they're really doing a good job with public relations, but it's kind of a nightmare. So they were having water issues, mold, you name it. It's a very early product. I think the idea and the concept and the leadership, I think it's awesome, and that's why I've been following along. The current state of the product has some challenges. I think Dan said it very well. It's a huge opportunity. It's amazing. But like as a solution today, there are some concerns around it.
Yeah.
They're delicately treading the water with it.
It'd be
Yeah, good to know.
it'd be extremely city and state specific on that. You'd have to get a lot of things in writing and really know what you're doing before committing to something like that, because it's unfortunate, but there are instances where you could have a boxable come to site. The inspector shows up, goes, "What the hell is this?" And all of a sudden, you're shipping it back. Actually, you're probably not shipping it back. You're probably in a lot of trouble. So
Fold it back up. Return label.
plant some trees in front of it so they don't notice.
Put an RMA tag on it. It's good.
But I'd look, actually, yeah, I would look at like small homes, you know what I mean? Like even you can stick frame a small home pretty quickly, you know. And actually on that note, few update for you guys in my pod, I showed you guys that ICF built tiny house that I helped build. So that property there, that's my friend Marco's, but I had the ICF experience. He took a single family detached house, he converted it to a duplex. We built that 525 square foot tiny house, but we put a basement on it, so it ended up being over 1,000 square feet. He just sold that for over 1.2 million, and like that's nuts. But here's the crazy thing: the rents actually work out on that. Like you guys probably saw some of the crazy numbers I was charging for rent, but they actually work out for that up here. So,
That it's insane. Yeah, insane.
there's a reason why I want out, man. Like I'm not paying $700,000 for a shitty detached bungalow up here. So I wanna. That's why I'd like to see my dollar go further and maybe de-risk a little bit, because when you dump that much into one project, you're like, you gotta be careful.
Hey Dan, I think you said it perfectly. I took a quick note. I may say it in a different way, but I think you nailed it on the head when you said we will not be less environmentally conscious in the future, and having to think smarter about how cities develop. I think that speaks to your background and your angle of approach for investing. So appreciate you sharing that. That stood out to me today.
No problem. It goes back to the whole thing, I guess. If there's a quote that sums this up, I think it was a Wayne Gretzky quote. Yeah, I'm Canadian. I'll use Wayne Gretzky. Essentially, he said, "Skate to where the puck's going, not to where the puck is." Right. So we want to know like where the city's going. That's why I'm talking about reading official plans and whatnot. And so my advice is, don't be the 800th short-term rental in your medium-sized city. Go figure out what's coming down the pipeline. Like, stop jumping on what everyone else is already doing. For me up here, it was duplex conversions. There was a period of time where buying a house, converting it to a duplex was a grand slam. It was like so good and easy. It did not take long for everyone to figure that out. And all of a sudden you couldn't do it anymore. It didn't work because the prices ran through the roof and everyone caught on to it. So figure out what's coming up, not what's working right now. And my whole point of like this chat was figure out where your city's going. Are they going to overhaul their zoning laws? What cities just overhauled their zoning laws to your favor, right? And go figure that out.
Hey Dan, question for you. In the future, you know, you've got some pretty good examples there of your own development projects. Do you think that you would continue to do that if given the opportunity? Or I know that you mentioned that it might have been better for you to just quickly flip that land and move on, as opposed to following through with the development of that land, because it looked like it was quite a big undertaking. Is that something
And
you do again, or what?
I did a lot of flip-flopping on this. So, and you're 100% right. So I got that land severed. I could have sold it for 350, and that's conservative. I might have been able to sell that for 400. 200 per lot. I was absolutely getting that. I got more than 200 per lot on that house I tore down. So let's say I could have got 400 for that. You're absolutely right. Why go through all that craziness to build a couple houses when I could have just flipped the land? And the short answer to that is I didn't see what happened coming. Nobody knew that both my government or your government was going to jack up interest rates like 7, 8, crazy. Like we knew it was coming, but not like that. You know what I mean? And that's what kind of hurt me as I was doing this. I guess to further answer your question, it's the whole thing. Do I flip a house or do I do a burr? Do I want short-term money? Do I want long-term wealth? Right. And that's what this comes down to. And you know what? I'm gonna say that on that project that I tore the house down and split the land into two, I actually made a really big mistake selling that. I to this day I say it's the biggest mistake I ever made in real estate. I made about $80,000 doing that, which was cool. I only had it for a few months, and I was almost never even there. I did this all from my desktop with a few trips out there. Happy to make 80 G's doing that. But when I look at it in hindsight, I also had an agreement in place to partner with my buddy Marco, who's an experienced builder. He was going to pay me for the boost in land that I created by severing the land. The two of us were going to build 2 huge duplexes, and in that town was a really well-regarded town, only 10 minutes from me here. And not only that, I would have got to work hand in hand with Marco, learning how to build houses from a professional instead of hacking my way through it like I did this past year. Huge mistake on my part, both financially and career-wise. Now, luckily, when I did the new build this year, I had Marco coming out to site, checking things out, helping me out. And I had another guy that built that other semi, like on the phone with me all the time. I actually didn't mess up too much for being a first time, but it could have went smoothly. I'll put it that way. So unless you guys have anything else, I'll roll along. Everything else?
Dan, I just wanted to say that you did an awesome job this evening presenting that and answering all of the following questions. So nice job, man.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I've heard, if you guys are interested, I have been on a couple podcasts talking about this kind of stuff. Now, with that said, you kind of got the best version of it tonight anyways, but if you do want to hear more about it, you can punch my name into Spotify or YouTube, whatever. There's a few things out there. But I'll leave you with this too. I am interested in opportunities. I'm absolutely interested in opportunities, whether it's with you guys or, you know, someone else doing some stuff with land, or you want to do some stuff with land, but want someone to look at it, give you an opinion. I'd be happy to like do this kind of stuff with folks. So
Cool. Yeah, that was super interesting. And yeah, thanks for sharing that. I was just like, that sounds interesting. Let me check it out. So I'm glad I reached out.
I'm glad you came out.
Yeah.
Cool, guys. Anyways, everyone have a good night. Yeah, have a good night, guys. Keep in touch and go from there.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
No problem.
See you
Bye.
guys.
Bye.